I'm Samantha Mitchell, 28 years old, and I never thought I'd be standing in the pouring rain, staring at my childhood home with new locks on the doors. My mother, Patricia, stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You don't live here anymore. This isn't your home," she said coldly. I couldn't believe my ears. I had only been gone on a business trip for 3 days. As the rain soaked through my clothes, I noticed garbage bags piled on the curb, my belongings. And there in the window was my stepfather Warren, watching with a satisfied smirk on his face. Before I dive into how I went from homeless to owning half the house legally, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button and like this video if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family betrayal. Trust me, this story has twists you won't see coming. To understand how I ended up locked out of my own home, I need to take you back a bit. I wasn't some deadbeat kid trying to live off my parents. Actually, it was quite the opposite. I was a marketing executive at a digital agency in Chicago, living in my own apartment downtown with a view of Lake Michigan. I had built a life for myself that my dad would have been proud of. My father, James Mitchell, died when I was 15 from a sudden heart attack. He was only 45. Dad built our family home himself, a beautiful 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch in a suburb of Chicago. Every corner of that house held memories of him teaching me to ride a bike in the driveway, reading bedtime stories in the window seat, and our Sunday pancake traditions in the kitchen. That house wasn't just a building to me. It was the physical embodiment of my father's love. 3 years after Dad died, my mother remarried Warren Brooks. He seemed charming at first, bringing flowers to Mom, taking an interest in my school activities, and acting like he wanted to be a supportive stepfather. But as soon as the wedding ring was on my mother's finger, the mask started slipping. Nothing in the house was ever arranged to his liking. My father's woodworking tools in the garage were taking up too much space. Family photos featuring my dad mysteriously moved from prominent positions to drawers and closets. My grandmother, Evelyn, my father's mother, lived with us during my teenage years. She was a strong-willed, perceptive woman who saw through Warren from day one. "That man's smile doesn't reach his eyes," she would whisper to me when Mom wasn't around. Grandma Evelyn was my rock after Dad died, the connection to him I desperately needed. I moved out at 18 for college and stayed away, building my career, only coming home for holidays and brief visits. Those visits became increasingly tense as Warren seemed to resent any reminder of my father's existence, including me. Then, about 8 months ago, 2 things happened simultaneously. The digital marketing agency where I worked announced massive downsizing, and my position was eliminated with only a modest severance package. That same week, Grandma Evelyn had a stroke. At 84, her recovery would be long and challenging, and my mother was overwhelmed trying to care for her. It seemed like the perfect solution to move back home temporarily. I could help care for Grandma Evelyn, regroup financially, and look for a new position. Mom seemed grateful for the help at first. What I didn't realize was how much Warren had changed my mother over the years. The warm, nurturing woman who had bandaged my scraped knees and cheered at my soccer games had become anxious, constantly seeking Warren's approval. She second-guessed herself constantly and deferred to him on everything from what to make for dinner to major financial decisions. The first few months back home were tense but manageable. I contributed to household expenses from my savings, took on most of Grandma's care, and conducted my job search. Warren would make passive-aggressive comments about adult children who couldn't launch within my earshot but never directly to my face. Grandma Evelyn's condition worsened despite our best efforts. One night, as I sat with her while she drifted in and out of consciousness, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't let them push you away from your father's house, Sammy. He built it for you too." The next morning, she was gone. I was devastated. What I didn't know then was that Grandma Evelyn had updated her will just weeks before her stroke. She had inherited a 30% ownership stake in our family home when my father died, something I hadn't even known, and she had left that entire stake to me. The day after her funeral, I overheard Warren talking to my mother in the kitchen. "Now that the old lady is gone, we can finally sell this place and move somewhere without all these memories," he said, practically spitting the last word. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed time to process my grief and formulate a plan. But looking back, that was when Warren's behavior toward me shifted from passive-aggressive to actively hostile. It was as if he could sense an obstacle to his plans, and that obstacle was me. What I didn't realize then was just how far Warren would go to get me out of the picture, or how complicit my own mother would become in his schemes. The garbage bags on the curb were just the beginning. "You can crash here as long as you need," my friend Haley said, helping me bring the salvaged garbage bags into her one-bedroom apartment. "I can't believe your mom would just lock you out like that." Neither could I. I kept calling my mother, but each call went straight to voicemail. I left messages ranging from confused to angry to pleading, but received no response. After 3 days of silence, I decided to confront her in person. I couldn't approach the house. Warren had made it clear he would call the police if I trespassed, so I went to the elementary school where my mother had worked as a secretary for 20 years. When I walked into the school office, her face went pale. "Mom, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the stares from her coworkers. "This isn't appropriate, Samantha. I'm at work." Her voice was tight, controlled. "What's not appropriate is changing the locks on your daughter and throwing her belongings in the trash," I countered. The office administrator tactfully suggested they use the empty conference room, and my mother reluctantly agreed. Once the door closed behind us, I expected tears, explanation, perhaps even an apology. What I got instead shocked me to my core. "You've been using us," she said coldly. "Living rent-free, eating our food, taking advantage of our generosity. Warren helped me see how manipulative you've been. Mom, I paid you $800 a month from my savings. I was the one getting up at night with Grandma, bathing her, taking her to doctor appointments. How can you say I was using you? And now we find out you've been plotting with Evelyn behind our backs to steal the house." Her voice trembled, not with emotion, but with anger. "What are you talking about? I didn't even know about Grandma's will until after she died. Warren says you've been planning this for months, manipulating a sick old woman to cut us out. We know what you're trying to do, and it won't work. That house belongs to us." The conversation deteriorated from there. It was like talking to a stranger wearing my mother's face. Every word that came out of her mouth sounded like it had been scripted by Warren. She truly believed I was trying to steal the family home, when all I had done was temporarily move back to help care for my dying grandmother. Shaken, I left the school and went straight to a law office I had found online. Riley Jackson specialized in estate and property law, and thankfully had an opening that afternoon. After hearing my story and reviewing the copy of Grandma Evelyn's will I had obtained from her lawyer, Riley confirmed what I had suspected. "You do own 30% of the house, Miss Mitchell. Your grandmother's bequest is legally sound. They cannot sell the property without your consent, and they certainly had no right to evict you without proper notice. So I can go back?" Riley grimaced. "Legally, yes. Practically, I wouldn't recommend showing up without law enforcement present given what you've told me about your stepfather's threats. Let's start with a formal letter asserting your property rights and go from there." That night, alone on Haley's pull-out couch, I cried myself to sleep clutching the only photo of my father I had managed to grab, a faded picture of him teaching me to fish when I was 7. I had hit rock bottom. But as I drifted off to sleep, I made a promise to myself and to my father's memory. I would not be bullied out of my inheritance. I would fight back. The next day brought another shock. I had reached out to my cousin Melissa, who had always been like a sister to me. We had shared holidays, summer vacations, and teenage secrets. I expected sympathy and support. Instead, she responded with a cold text message. "Aunt Patricia told us what you're doing. I never thought you'd stoop so low as to sue your own mother over Grandma's will. Don't contact me again." Warren had been busy, spreading his poisonous narrative throughout the extended family. Later that day, I drove by the house, hoping to at least retrieve more of my belongings. What I saw made my blood run cold. The garbage bags were gone, and there was a dumpster in the driveway. As I watched from my car across the street, Warren emerged from the house carrying what looked like my father's antique roll-top desk, a treasured family heirloom, and unceremoniously tossed it into the dumpster. I was reaching for my phone to call the police when my mother came out of the house. She looked at the desk, then at Warren, but said nothing before going back inside. Her silent complicity was perhaps the most painful betrayal of all. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. When I opened it, my hands began to shake. "You'll never set foot in this house again. Try it, and you'll regret it." Warren had escalated from passive-aggressive comments to outright threats. As I sat in my car watching him destroy my father's possessions, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about a house anymore, it was about standing up to a bully who had manipulated and terrorized my family for too long. The next 2 weeks were a crash course in property law, inheritance rights, and family betrayal. I took a leave of absence from my job search to focus entirely on the legal battle ahead. Riley had sent the formal letter asserting my ownership rights, but Warren's response came in the form of a counter letter from his attorney claiming that Grandma Evelyn had been mentally incompetent when she changed her will. I needed more ammunition. I remembered that my father had been close friends with Thomas Reynolds, who had gone from being a small-time contractor to one of Chicago's most successful real estate developers. I hadn't seen him since my father's funeral, but I found him through LinkedIn and requested a meeting. Thomas remembered me immediately. "James's little girl?" he said with a sad smile, though not so little anymore. "Your dad would be proud of the woman you've become." Over coffee, I explained my situation. Thomas listened intently, his expression darkening when I mentioned Warren's name. "I never liked that guy," he admitted. "Something off about him. Your dad felt the same way, you know. When your mom started dating Warren, James was worried. Not jealous, your dad wasn't like that, but concerned." "What can I do, Thomas? They're trying to sell my father's house out from under me." Thomas thought for a moment. "James always kept detailed records. Have you checked his safe deposit box? He mentioned setting one up for family documents when you were born." I hadn't known about any safe deposit box, but a call to my father's old bank confirmed there was one in his name, with my mother and me listed as accessors. The next day, I went to the bank and discovered a treasure trove. My father's will, insurance policies, birth certificates, and a folder labeled house. Inside were the original deed, mortgage documents, and a handwritten letter addressed to my mother and me. "If you're reading this," it began, "something has happened to me. This house is my legacy to you both. Patricia, my love. I built this home for our family, for our future. Samantha, my darling daughter. I built this with your children in mind, with spaces where new memories can grow alongside our old ones. I hope this house shelters you both for many years to come." Reading my father's handwriting after all these years brought fresh tears, but also renewed determination. The documents confirmed what Riley had said. Grandma Evelyn had inherited a 30% stake, with my mother holding the remaining 70%. Armed with this information, I attended Grandma Evelyn's funeral. I had been dreading it, knowing Warren and my mother would be there. But I refused to be kept from saying goodbye to the woman who had been my strongest link to my father. I arrived early and sat in the front row. When my mother and Warren entered, there was a moment of tense silence before they took seats on the opposite side of the aisle. Throughout the service, I could feel Warren's glare burning into me. When it came time for family members to speak, I approached the podium. "Grandma Evelyn taught me what resilience looks like," I began. "She showed me that we honor those we've lost by protecting what they valued and standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult." I looked directly at my mother as I spoke. For just a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the woman she used to be, in her eyes a hint of recognition, perhaps even remorse. But then Warren placed his hand on her shoulder, and her expression hardened again. After the service, Warren worked the room, speaking in hushed tones to relatives and family friends. I could see the sideways glances cast in my direction, the whispers behind hands. My Aunt Karen, my mother's sister, approached me cautiously. "Samantha, what's really going on?" she asked. "Patricia is saying you're trying to force them out of the house." "That's not true, Aunt Karen. I just want what Grandma Evelyn legally left to me. They locked me out and threw my things away." Karen's eyes widened. "Patricia didn't mention that part." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I'm worried about your mom. She's been different lately. Warren controls the medications she takes for anxiety and depression. She goes through bottles so quickly. This new information chilled me. I had noticed my mother seemed more withdrawn, less present, but had attributed it to grief over Grandma Evelyn. Could Warren be over-medicating her to make her more compliant? As I was leaving the funeral home, I was approached by a young man about my age whom I didn't immediately recognize. Sam? It's Connor, Warren's son. I was surprised. Connor and I had met only a handful of times over the years. Warren rarely spoke of his son from his first marriage, and Connor had never lived with them. I heard what's happening, he said quietly. I'm not here to take sides, but there's something you should know. My father's business is failing. He's deeply in debt. That's why he's so desperate to sell the house. How do you know this? I work for him, I should say. I was going through some paperwork and found loan documents. When I asked him about it, he fired me. Classic Warren move. Connor's bitter laugh told me this wasn't the first time his father had betrayed him. That evening, I visited my father's grave. I hadn't been since the anniversary of his death 6 months earlier. Standing before his headstone, I felt an overwhelming mix of grief and anger. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this fight, Dad, I whispered. But I'm not going to let him erase you from our lives. As if in answer, the wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves of the oak tree that shaded the cemetery. I remembered something my father used to say, Mitchells don't back down from bullies. In that moment, I found my resolve again. On Riley's recommendation, I consulted with Julia Stevens, a high-powered attorney specializing in contentious property disputes. Her office in downtown Chicago screamed success, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and awards lining the walls. So your stepfather is trying to force a sale by claiming your grandmother was incompetent when she left you her share of the house. Julia summarized after reviewing my case. And in the meantime, they've illegally evicted you and are potentially destroying your personal property. That's right. Miss Mitchell, I don't normally say this in initial consultations, but your stepfather has made some serious legal mistakes. Changing the locks without notice, disposing of your belongings, threatening you via text. These are not the actions of someone on solid legal footing. She smiled for the first time. I think we can work with this. Julia's retainer wasn't cheap, but I used a chunk of my dwindling savings to secure her services. She immediately filed for an emergency injunction to prevent the sale of the house and sent a more strongly worded legal notice demanding that I be allowed to retrieve my personal property. Warren's response was as swift as it was predictable. The day after receiving the injunction, I found my car in Haley's parking lot with a smashed windshield and slashed tires. There was no note, no direct evidence it was him, but the message was clear. I filed a police report, but without witnesses or security camera footage, there was little the officers could do beyond documenting the vandalism. Still, having an official record of the escalating harassment was part of Julia's strategy. We're building a pattern of behavior, she explained. Each incident strengthens our case. 2 days later, my phone rang with my mother's number. My heart leaped. Could this be a breakthrough? Had she finally come to her senses? Sam. Her voice sounded small, fragile. Why are you doing this to us? Why can't you just let us move on? Mom, I'm not doing anything to you. I just want what legally belongs to me. What Dad would have wanted me to have. Your father has been gone for 13 years, she said, a note of anger creeping into her voice. Warren is my husband now. He takes care of me. Does he, Mom? Or does he control you? There was a long pause. I don't know why you hate him so much. I don't hate him. I just see him for what he is. He's using you to get the house so he can sell it. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had a slight tremor. He says, we need to sell. For our retirement. Mom, has Warren been giving you extra medication? Aunt Karen mentioned, I have to go, she said suddenly. Warren's home. The line went dead. It wasn't much, but it was the first crack in her resolve. The first hint that maybe, just maybe, my real mother was still in there somewhere. The next day, Julia discovered that Warren had been systematically draining the joint accounts he shared with my mother. Over $50,000 had been transferred to a separate account in just the last month. This is good for us, Julia said. It shows financial impropriety. But I'm concerned about your mother. This level of control, financial, medical, it borders on elder abuse. She's only 58, I pointed out. Age isn't the only factor in vulnerability. From what you've described, your mother has become increasingly dependent on Warren, both emotionally and now, it seems, financially. We filed for another injunction, this time freezing the joint accounts to prevent further withdrawals. The judge granted it, along with an order preventing any substantial changes to the property until ownership could be definitively established. Warren's response came in the form of a lowball buyout offer, $75,000 for my 30% share of a house worth nearly $800,000 in the current market. He must think you're desperate or stupid, Julia scoffed. We'll counter at market value. The day after we rejected his offer, I began receiving anonymous text messages from different burner numbers. Back off or else. You should look both ways before crossing the street. Accidents happen to greedy little girls. I forwarded each one to Julia and the police, adding them to the growing file. The confrontation I had been dreading finally happened at my cousin Melissa's baby shower. I had almost declined the invitation, knowing Warren and my mother would be there. But Julia advised me to go. Don't hide, she said. Don't give them the satisfaction of thinking they've intimidated you. I was arranging my gift on the present table when Warren approached, my mother trailing behind him like a shadow. You've got some nerve showing up here, he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. It's my cousin's baby shower. I have every right to be here. Rights? You want to talk about rights? His face was growing red. What about our right to live our lives without you interfering? Your mother is heartbroken over what you're doing. Several guests were openly staring now. My mother looked mortified. Warren, please, she whispered. Not here. No, Patricia. Everyone should know what kind of daughter you raised. After everything we did for her, taking her in when she had nowhere else to go, and this is how she repays us? With lawsuits and restraining orders? I never filed a restraining order, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. Though maybe I should have, considering the threatening texts and my vandalized car. What are you talking about? My mother asked, looking genuinely confused. Ask your husband, I replied. Ask him about the text messages. Ask him where he was the night my car was destroyed. Warren's expression shifted from anger to something darker, more dangerous. You're making a mistake, Samantha. A big mistake. As he turned to leave, pulling my mother along with him, she glanced back at me. For just a moment, I saw something in her eyes, doubt, perhaps, or the first glimmer of recognition that the man she had married might not be who she thought he was. The following day, Julia called with news. The judge granted a temporary restraining order against Warren. He can't contact you, can't come within 500 feet of you, and can't make any changes to the house without court approval. It was a small victory, but an important one. For the first time since being locked out of my home, I felt a surge of confidence. Warren wasn't invincible. He could be fought, and he could be beaten. 3 weeks after the confrontation at Melissa's baby shower, I received an unexpected call from Connor, Warren's son. They're going to Cabo for their anniversary this weekend, he said without preamble. 3 days, leaving Friday. Why are you telling me this? I asked cautiously. Because I still have a key to the house. And I think it's time you saw what my father's been hiding. I was hesitant. Entering the house while they were away could potentially undermine the legal case Julia was carefully building. On the other hand, Warren had already demonstrated his willingness to destroy evidence and personal property. After consulting with Julia, who advised extreme caution, I agreed to meet Connor at the house on Saturday morning. He was waiting in the driveway when I arrived, looking nervously over his shoulder. We should be quick, he said. Dad has a security system, but I know the code. Walking back into my childhood home after months of exile was surreal. Everything looked the same, yet somehow different, as if I was seeing it through a distorted lens. Family photos had been rearranged, with several featuring me noticeably absent. I want to check my room first, I said. Connor nodded. I'll keep watch downstairs. When I opened the door to my bedroom, I gasped. The space had been completely transformed into a home gym, with my furniture nowhere to be seen. Every trace of my existence had been erased. I took photos with my phone, documenting everything. Sam, Connor called from downstairs. You need to see this. I found him in Warren's home office, a room that had once been my father's study. Connor was standing by the desk, pointing to an open drawer. Look at these, he said, indicating a stack of documents. I pulled them out carefully, spreading them across the desk. What I found made my blood run cold. There were mortgage refinancing documents for the house, dated just 2 months ago, with my mother's signature, except the signature didn't look right. I had seen my mother's handwriting all my life, and this was clearly an imitation. He forged her signature, Connor confirmed. I've seen him practice it. Deeper in the drawer, we found bank statements showing massive withdrawals and transfers to an account at an offshore bank. A quick calculation suggested Warren had siphoned off nearly $200,000 over the past year, money that had likely come from the refinancing. His business is underwater, Connor explained. He's been using your mother's credit and the house to keep it afloat, but it's a sinking ship. In a locked file cabinet that Connor helped me open, we found even more disturbing evidence. A file labeled Evelyn Mitchell containing medical records that appeared to have been altered, presumably to support Warren's claim that my grandmother had been mentally incompetent. But the most shocking discovery came when Connor accidentally knocked over a small decorative box on a bookshelf, revealing a hidden safe behind it. I know this combination too, he said grimly. It's his first wife's birthday. He's not as clever as he thinks. Inside the safe was a velvet jewelry bag containing my grandmother's missing pieces, including her diamond engagement ring and the pearl necklace she had promised would be mine someday. There was also a thick manila envelope. When I opened it, I found my father's personal journals that I had thought were lost years ago, along with several legal documents bearing his signature. He kept these hidden all this time, I whispered, tears filling my eyes as I ran my fingers over my father's handwriting. We were so engrossed in our discoveries that we didn't hear the front door open. The first indication that something was wrong was the sound of a purse dropping to the floor in the hallway. What are you doing in my house? My mother gasped from the doorway, her face pale with shock. Before I could answer, heavy footsteps pounded up the porch steps, and Warren's voice boomed through the house. Patricia, why is there a car in our driveway? Connor and I exchanged panicked glances. They weren't supposed to be back until tomorrow. Mom, I said quickly, gathering the forged documents. You need to see these. Warren appeared behind my mother, his face contorting with rage when he saw me. You, he roared. How dare you break into our home? I didn't break in. Connor let me in because I needed to retrieve my personal property you've been destroying and hiding. Warren's gaze shifted to his son, his expression hardening. You treacherous little— Don't, Connor interrupted. Don't pretend you haven't been manipulating and lying to everyone for years. Sam needs to know what you've been doing. Patricia needs to know. Warren lunged forward, grabbing for the documents in my hand. I stepped back, but he seized my wrist, twisting until I cried out in pain. Let go of her, Connor shouted, moving to intervene. Warren shoved him hard against the bookcase, then turned back to me, his grip tightening. Give me those papers, you ungrateful little— Warren, stop it! My mother screamed, her voice higher and more frantic than I'd ever heard it. You're hurting her. Stay out of this, Patricia, Warren snarled, not even looking at her. This doesn't concern you. Something in his dismissive tone seemed to snap my mother out of her usual compliance. Doesn't concern me. She's my daughter. Warren ignored her, continuing to twist my arm while reaching for the documents with his other hand. The pain was excruciating, but I refused to let go. I'm calling the police, my mother announced suddenly, pulling her phone from her pocket. Warren released me so abruptly that I stumbled backward. You're calling no one, he said, advancing toward my mother now. The look in his eyes must have frightened her as much as it did me, because she backed away, fumbling with her phone. Warren lunged for it, but Connor stepped between them. That's enough, Dad, he said firmly. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Warren's face contorted with a rage I'd never seen before. He shoved Connor aside with surprising force, causing him to crash into my mother. As both of them fell, Warren turned back to me, raising his hand as if to strike. I'll destroy you before I let you take what's mine, he hissed. The front door burst open, and 2 police officers rushed in, weapons drawn. Police! Everyone freeze! It turned out my mother had managed to dial 911 before Warren knocked the phone from her hand, and the dispatcher had heard enough of the confrontation to send officers immediately. As they separated us and began taking statements, I clutched the evidence we'd found, refusing to let it out of my sight even as a paramedic examined my injured wrist. My mother sat on the sofa, looking shell-shocked, while Connor explained to the officers what we had discovered. When one officer approached me with my grandmother's jewelry bag, asking if these were the items I claimed had been stolen, I noticed my mother staring at the pearls with recognition dawning in her eyes. "He told me you took those when you moved out," she whispered. "He said you stole them." In that moment, as the officers led Warren outside in handcuffs for assault and violating the restraining order, I saw the first real crack in the facade Warren had built around my mother. The truth was finally beginning to seep through. But I knew this was just the beginning. The documents we'd discovered had blown the case wide open, but Warren would not go down without a fight. And my relationship with my mother, damaged as it was, would need more than one moment of clarity to repair. As I was escorted off the property, still technically not my residence in the eyes of the law, despite the ownership stake, I took one last look at my childhood home. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope that someday I might walk through its doors again, not as an intruder, but as a rightful owner. The legal deposition was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early October, 6 months after I'd been locked out of my home. Julia had prepared me thoroughly, but nothing could have readied me for the emotional impact of sitting across from my mother and Warren in the sterile conference room of the law firm. Warren looked polished and controlled, his earlier rage carefully concealed behind an expression of wounded dignity. My mother appeared fragile, her hands trembling slightly as she arranged and rearranged the tissue box in front of her. Warren's attorney, Maxwell Green, was known for his aggressive tactics. He began my deposition with a barrage of questions designed to paint me as an opportunistic freeloader. "Miss Mitchell, isn't it true that you moved back into your mother's home as an adult because you were financially unable to support yourself?" "I moved home temporarily to help care for my grandmother while she was dying, and I contributed $800 monthly to household expenses," I replied, just as Julia had coached me. "And yet you now claim ownership of a portion of the house where you were essentially a guest?" "I claim the ownership that was legally left to me by my grandmother, who inherited her share from my father." The questioning continued in this vein for hours, with Green attempting to twist every response. Julia objected frequently, but the emotional toll was tremendous. By the lunch break, I was exhausted. "You're doing great," Julia assured me. "They're trying to rattle you because their legal position is weak." When we returned, it was my mother's turn to be deposed. I expected her testimony to echo Warren's narrative, but I wasn't prepared for the venom in her voice. "Samantha has always been selfish," she stated flatly. "When her father died, it was like she thought her grief was more important than mine. When she moved back home, she took over, criticizing how I cared for my own mother-in-law, making Warren feel unwelcome in his own home." Each word felt like a physical blow. This wasn't just Warren's manipulation, there was real anger there. Resentments that had apparently festered for years. "Mrs. Brooks," Julia began her cross-examination carefully. "Can you tell us about your current medication regimen?" My mother looked startled. "I don't see how that's relevant. Your daughter has expressed concern that you may be over-medicated, possibly affecting your judgment." Warren's attorney objected vehemently, but the judge overruled him, allowing the line of questioning to continue. "I take medication for anxiety and depression," my mother admitted reluctantly. "Warren manages my prescriptions for me." "And how many pills do you take each day?" My mother frowned, looking uncertain. "I'm not sure exactly. Warren sets them out for me morning and evening." Julia produced a medical record we'd subpoenaed from my mother's doctor. "According to your physician, you're prescribed 0.5 milligrams of Xanax twice daily as needed. However, the pharmacy records show this prescription has been refilled every 10 days for the past 4 months. That would amount to approximately 6 pills per day, more than 5 times the prescribed dosage. Can you explain this discrepancy?" My mother looked genuinely confused. That can't be right. I only take what Warren gives me. Warren shifted uncomfortably in his seat, whispering urgently to his attorney. The deposition took an even more surprising turn when Rebecca Winters, a family friend who had known us for decades, testified next. I had always considered Rebecca almost like an aunt. She and my mother had been friends since college, and she had been a constant presence throughout my childhood. Samantha became very controlling after moving back home, Rebecca stated. She interfered with Warren and Patricia's marriage, constantly undermining Warren's authority and making unreasonable demands. I stared at her in disbelief. Rebecca had visited several times while I was caring for Grandma Evelyn and had witnessed firsthand how dedicated I'd been to her care. She had even commented once that Warren seemed resentful of the time my mother spent with Grandma. During the break, Julia approached me with a disturbing revelation. Our investigator found something interesting about Rebecca Winters. She and Warren have been exchanging text messages, a lot of them, at all hours. There's a good chance they're having an affair. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not only was Warren manipulating my mother, but he was also cheating on her with her oldest friend who was now lying under oath to help him. As the deposition continued, Warren's attorney introduced a surprise motion claiming that a clause in the original property deed might invalidate Grandma Evelyn's inheritance and, by extension, my claim to ownership. The judge called a recess to review the documents. During the break, I received a disturbing call from Connor. "Sam, my dad fired me from the family business," he said, his voice tight with anger. "He found out I've been talking to you and your lawyer. Connor, I'm so sorry. That's not all. He offered me $50,000 to testify that I saw you emotionally manipulating your grandmother into changing her will." "What? But you weren't even there when she updated her will." "He doesn't care. He just wants me to lie. When I refused, he threatened to ruin me." His exact words. After I shared this information with Julia, she immediately filed a motion to have Connor's testimony included in the record as evidence of witness tampering. That evening, I returned to Haley's apartment to find it had been broken into. My laptop was missing, and clothes had been strewn everywhere. More disturbingly, someone had used red paint to scrawl back off across the living room wall. The police took a report, but without witnesses or clear evidence linking Warren to the break-in, there was little they could do beyond documenting the incident. I was starting to feel the strain of the ongoing battle, not just financially as my savings dwindled, but emotionally and now physically, as I no longer felt safe even in my temporary home. To make matters worse, my boss at the new marketing position I'd finally secured called me into her office the next day. "Samantha, I've received some concerning reports about your personal situation potentially affecting client relationships." She began uncomfortably. "What reports? From whom?" She wouldn't say directly, but it became clear that someone almost certainly Warren had contacted the agency with stories about my unstable behavior and pending legal troubles. While she didn't fire me outright, the message was clear. Resolve this quickly, or your position may be in jeopardy. That night, sitting on Haley's sofa bed surrounded by the aftermath of the break-in, I hit my second rock bottom. The legal fees were mounting. My professional reputation was being attacked, and the emotional toll of fighting my own family had left me exhausted. For the first time, I considered giving up accepting Warren's lowball offer just to be done with the whole nightmare. As if sensing my moment of weakness, my phone rang at almost midnight. It was my mother, her voice slurred and unsteady. "Sammy? Are you there?" "Mom? It's midnight. Are you okay?" "I found them," she said cryptically. "The pills. So many pills." "Mom, what are you talking about?" "Where's Warren?" "Business dinner. He thinks I'm sleeping." She paused, her breathing heavy. I looked in his drawer. Found bottles and bottles. Been crushing them into my food. Making me crazy. My heart raced. "Mom, listen to me. You need to get out of that house. Can you call Aunt Karen to pick you up?" "Can't leave," she mumbled. "He'd find me. Always finds me." "Mom." "He's been lying, Sammy, about everything. I found the papers, the new mortgage. I never signed." Her voice drifted off. "Mom! Mom!" But there was only silence on the line. I immediately called 911, requesting a welfare check at the house. Then I called Julia, who advised me to document the call and warned me not to go to the house myself given the restraining order Warren had subsequently filed against me. The next morning, Julia called with news that sent a chill down my spine. The police conducted the welfare check. Your mother claimed everything was fine and denied making any call to you last night. She said she took a sleeping pill and has no memory of any conversation. She was lucid, Julia. Scared, but lucid. She said Warren's been crushing pills into her food. I believe you. And this actually gives us leverage. I've been doing some digging into Warren's past. Did you know this isn't his first time using these tactics? His ex-wife made similar allegations during their divorce claims of medication tampering, financial control, isolation from family. Why didn't this come up in the background check? The records were sealed as part of their settlement, but I have a contact who was able to get us the information legally. Julia paused. There's more. Warren is planning to leave the country. He's liquidating assets and has purchased one-way tickets to a non-extradition country for next month. The walls were closing in from all sides. Warren was planning his escape, potentially with my mother's money and my inheritance. And, based on her strange call and subsequent denial, I was more convinced than ever that my mother wasn't just being manipulated, she was being deliberately drugged into compliance. The legal battle had just become a race against time. We need to change our approach, Julia announced during our strategy meeting the next day. Defending against Warren's accusations isn't enough anymore. We need to go on the offensive. I nodded, determined despite my exhaustion. What's the plan? Multi-pronged attack, she explained, spreading documents across her desk. First, we file criminal complaints for the forgery, financial fraud, and potential elder abuse. Second, we go public with the story within legal boundaries, of course. Third, we leverage Connor's testimony about the witness tampering. And finally, we need to get your mother away from Warren long enough for the medications to clear her system. The legal filings happened swiftly, but it was the second strategy going public that proved surprisingly effective. With Julia's guidance, I crafted a careful narrative about the situation that focused on the property dispute without making unproven allegations. I leveraged my marketing background to create infographics explaining the legal timeline and reached out to a local reporter who covered real estate disputes. The resulting article, Family Home or Legal Battleground, the fight for a father's legacy, painted Warren in a decidedly unflattering light, highlighting the suspicious timing of the lockout just after my grandmother's death and the coincidental discovery of the lost clause in the property deed. The public attention had an immediate effect. 2 of Warren's business associates called me privately, expressing concern about the allegations and distancing themselves from joint ventures. One even provided documentation of a previous instance where Warren had misrepresented property ownership to secure funding information we promptly added to our legal arsenal. Warren retaliated by escalating his smear campaign, telling anyone who would listen that I was mentally unstable and financially desperate. But the tide of public opinion was turning, partly because Warren's own behavior was becoming increasingly erratic under pressure. A breakthrough came when we received the results of the subpoena for my mother's medical records. Her doctor, alarmed by the pharmacy records Julia had presented during the deposition, conducted a comprehensive blood panel that showed dangerously high levels of benzodiazepines and other sedatives far exceeding her prescribed dosages. This is enough for a temporary guardianship petition, Julia explained. If granted, it would give you or another family member temporary decision-making authority for your mother's welfare. Aunt Karen agreed to file as the potential guardian, being my mother's closest blood relative. When the hearing date was set, I organized an intervention of sorts, gathering Aunt Karen, 2 of my mother's oldest friends, excluding the traitorous Rebecca, and my mother's pastor, to confront her with the evidence of Warren's manipulation. Warren, naturally, refused to allow the group into the house, but Pastor Michael used a pretext to get my mother to church for a prayer meeting, where the others were waiting. I wasn't present, the restraining order prevented it, but Karen called me afterward, her voice thick with emotion. It was like watching someone wake up from a trance. Sam. When Dr. Littman showed her the blood test results and explained what those levels of medication would do to her cognitive function, she just crumbled. Did she believe it? That Warren's been medicating her without her knowledge? I think part of her did. She admitted finding pill bottles hidden in Warren's drawer, just like she told you in that late-night call. But then she got frightened, said Warren would be looking for her, and insisted on going home. It was progress, but not the breakthrough we'd hoped for. Warren's psychological hold on my mother remained strong, even when confronted with concrete evidence of his deception. Our next strategy involved the house itself. Since Warren had been legally barred from selling it, he had shifted to a new tactic: deliberate neglect. Neighbors reported that the once immaculate lawn was overgrown, gutters were falling off, and visible water damage was appearing on the exterior. He's trying to devalue the property, Julia explained. If he can't sell it, he'll make sure it's worth as little as possible. We countered by filing for a property inspection as part of the ongoing litigation. The court-appointed inspector documented numerous code violations and intentional damage, including water deliberately left running in a blocked sink that had caused significant flooding in the kitchen. Meanwhile, an anonymous tip, which I strongly suspected came from Connor, led the Financial Crimes Unit of the local police department to open an investigation into Warren's business practices. The pressure was mounting from all sides. Warren's desperation became evident when he attempted to file for bankruptcy to protect his assets. However, his filing was rejected due to numerous discrepancies and potential fraud in his financial disclosures. Throughout this period, I was facing my own challenges. The strain of the ongoing battle had cost me my new job. The company had decided that the distraction and negative publicity were too much of a liability. My savings were nearly depleted from legal fees and living expenses, and the emotional toll was immense. But unexpected support appeared from surprising sources. Former colleagues from my previous company offered freelance work. Connor provided inside information about Warren's plans and tactics. Even my cousin Melissa, who had initially believed Warren's lies, reached out after reading the newspaper article to apologize and offer her support. I should have known better, she admitted. The Warren you described in that article is exactly the man I've observed at family gatherings, always controlling, always manipulating. The court date for the property hearing was finally set for November 15th, almost 7 months after I'd been locked out of my home. Julia was confident in our case, bolstered by the mountain of evidence we'd accumulated. The forged documents, the medical reports, Connor's testimony about witness tampering, and the financial fraud that was now being investigated separately. Warren's made a critical mistake, Julia told me the night before the hearing. His business partners are filing a lawsuit against him for misappropriation of funds. His entire house of cards is collapsing. I should have felt triumphant, but mostly I felt sad. Sad for my mother, still trapped in Warren's web of deception. Sad for the months of my life consumed by this battle. Sad for the damage done to family relationships that might never be repaired. As I prepared for court the next morning, I received a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. Even if you win tomorrow, you'll lose everything that matters. I forwarded it to Julia and the police, then squared my shoulders and prepared for the final confrontation. Whatever Warren had planned, I was ready. The courthouse was imposing, its stone facade and broad steps designed to inspire both awe and anxiety. I arrived early, meeting Julia in the lobby to review our strategy one final time. Remember, she advised, no matter what Warren or his attorney say, maintain your composure. The judge needs to see you as the reasonable party here. I nodded, though my stomach was churning with nerves. This hearing would determine not just ownership of my childhood home, but potentially my mother's future as well. Warren and Maxwell Green arrived next. Warren impeccably dressed and projecting confidence, despite the legal troubles closing in around him. He pretended not to see me, but I caught the flash of hatred in his eyes as he passed. My mother was notably absent. Should we be concerned? I whispered to Julia. We subpoenaed her. If she doesn't appear, it actually works in our favor, she replied. It suggests Warren is preventing her testimony. As we filed into the courtroom, I spotted Connor sitting in the back row. He gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. Also present were Aunt Karen, several neighbors, and even Thomas Reynolds, my father's old friend who had helped me navigate the initial stages of this nightmare. Judge Eleanor Michaels had a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency. She called the hearing to order promptly at 9 a.m., outlining the issues to be decided: the validity of my grandmother's will, my claim to 30% ownership of the property, and the allegations of fraud and misconduct surrounding the attempted sale. Green opened with a surprise motion. Your Honor, we have new evidence demonstrating that Evelyn Mitchell was suffering from moderate to severe dementia when she amended her will, he announced, presenting a file to the court clerk. These medical evaluations, performed 6 months before her death, clearly indicate cognitive impairment inconsistent with testamentary capacity. Julia immediately objected. Your Honor, these documents were never provided during discovery. We question their authenticity and relevance. Judge Michaels frowned. Mr. Green, why are these being presented now, on the day of the hearing? They were only recently discovered, Your Honor, in Mrs. Mitchell's medical records. The convenient timing is suspect at best, Julia countered. Furthermore, we have testimony from Mrs. Mitchell's primary physician confirming her mental competence at the time the will was amended. The judge reviewed both sets of documents, her expression growing increasingly stern. Mr. Green, these evaluations appear to be from a doctor who never treated Mrs. Mitchell regularly. In fact, she peered over her glasses. This physician's name doesn't appear anywhere else in her medical history. I'm inclined to give them little weight. Green pushed back, but the judge's skepticism had clearly registered with everyone in the courtroom. As he continued his opening arguments, painting me as a calculating opportunist who had manipulated a dying woman, the courtroom door opened quietly. My mother slipped in, looking pale but determined. She was alone, and for the first time in months, her eyes were clear and focused. She took a seat in the back of the courtroom. Green, noticing her arrival, faltered momentarily before recovering his rhythm. Furthermore, Your Honor, the clause in the original property deed clearly states that the house cannot be divided without mutual consent of all parties. This supersedes any bequest in Evelyn Mitchell's will. It was a weak argument, and Julia dismantled it efficiently, pointing out that inheritance of partial ownership did not constitute division of the property as defined in the deed. When it came time for witness testimony, Warren took the stand first. He presented himself as a concerned husband, worried about his wife's well-being and frustrated by his stepdaughter's irrational fixation on a house that represented painful memories for my mother. Patricia wanted a fresh start, he testified smoothly. The house has become a financial burden, and selling it would secure our retirement while allowing her to finally move beyond the grief of losing her first husband. Julia's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Brooks, can you explain why you forged your wife's signature on refinancing documents for the property? Warren's face flushed. I did no such thing. We have forensic handwriting analysis confirming the forgery, as well as testimony from the notary who has stated under oath that she never witnessed Mrs. Brooks signing these papers. Would you like to reconsider your answer? His composure cracked slightly. Patricia authorized me to sign on her behalf. It was a simple matter of convenience. Was it also convenience that led you to empty the joint accounts you share with your wife? Or to conceal your mounting business debts while taking out a second mortgage on the property? Warren's attorney objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. Judge Michaels had seen the flash of guilt on Warren's face. Next came Connor's testimony about his father's offer of a bribe to lie about my relationship with my grandmother. Warren visibly seethed as his son detailed his pattern of manipulation and deception. He told me he would destroy Sam if she didn't back down, Connor testified. He said he had ways of making problems disappear. The courtroom grew tense as my mother was called to testify. I held my breath, unsure whether she would continue to support Warren's narrative or finally break free of his influence. She approached the stand slowly, avoiding eye contact with everyone, including me. After being sworn in, she sat with her hands tightly clasped in her lap. Mrs. Brooks, Green began gently. Can you tell the court about your relationship with your daughter in recent years? My mother took a deep breath. Samantha and I have been distant. After her father died, we both grieved differently. She threw herself into school and activities. I was lost for a long time. And when she moved back into your home last year, how would you characterize her behavior? My mother looked up, her eyes finding mine for the first time. She came home to help care for my mother-in-law, James's mother. She was devoted to Evelyn's care. More patient than I could be. Green looked startled, clearly not expecting this response. But isn't it true that she created tension in your household? That she and your husband frequently argued? There was tension, my mother acknowledged. Warren felt challenged by her presence, by her questions. Green tried to redirect, but my mother continued as if compelled to speak. Warren didn't like how Samantha reminded me of James, of the life we had before. He wanted me to choose him or the memories. The courtroom was utterly silent now, all eyes on my mother as she slowly, haltingly began to reclaim her voice. Mrs. Brooks. Judge Michaels interjected gently. Are you saying your husband was uncomfortable with your late husband's memory? My mother nodded. Warren wanted us to sell the house almost immediately after we married. I refused, then. It was the only time I ever stood up to him. Her voice broke. I should have done it more often. Green tried to call a recess, but Judge Michaels denied the request. Julia's cross-examination was brief and focused primarily on establishing my mother's current clarity of mind compared to the previous months. Mrs. Brooks. Your medical records show extremely high levels of benzodiazepines and other sedatives in recent blood tests. Were you aware you were taking these medications at these dosages? No, my mother replied. Warren managed my medications. He told me they were for anxiety, for depression, but I found. She hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. I found bottles of pills hidden in his office, and instructions on dosages for food and drinks. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Warren's face had gone from red to ashen. Your Honor, Green interrupted desperately. Mrs. Brooks has been under significant stress. These allegations are consistent with the evidence we've presented, Julia finished firmly. And with Mr. Brooks's pattern of control and manipulation. Judge Michaels called for order, then announced a brief recess to review the testimonies. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught my mother's eye again. She gave me a small, sad smile, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her in months. In the hallway, Warren approached her, his expression thunderous. What the hell was that? He hissed, grabbing her arm. Don't touch me, she said quietly but firmly, pulling away. After everything I've done for you, he continued, oblivious to the eyes watching them. You, ungrateful. Mr. Brooks. Judge Michaels's clerk interrupted sharply. The judge has requested that all parties remain separated during the recess. Warren released my mother's arm, his face contorted with barely contained rage. As he stormed away, my mother crossed the hallway to where I stood with Julia. Sammy, she said softly, I'm so sorry. For everything. Before I could respond, we were called back into the courtroom. Judge Michaels delivered her ruling with calm precision. Based on the evidence presented, I find that Evelyn Mitchell was of sound mind when she amended her will, and that Samantha Mitchell is the rightful heir to a 30% ownership stake in the property in question. Furthermore, I am issuing an immediate injunction preventing any sale, transfer, or further encumbrance of the property pending investigation into the allegations of forgery and fraud. She turned her stern gaze to Warren. Mr. Brooks, given the serious nature of the allegations against you, including potential financial crimes and elder abuse, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for further investigation. Warren leapt to his feet. This is outrageous. She has no right to that house. Patricia, tell them. My mother flinched but didn't respond. Warren's face twisted with rage as he realized he had lost control of both the case and my mother. You'll regret this, he spat, looking from my mother to me. Then even at the judge. All of you. Mr. Brooks, Judge Michaels said coldly, I suggest you control yourself before I hold you in contempt. Warren stormed out of the courtroom, Green hurrying after him. The hearing concluded with administrative details about transferring the property title to reflect my partial ownership. Outside the courthouse, my mother approached me hesitantly. I don't expect you to forgive me, she began. Mom, no, please let me finish. I don't even know how to describe it. Like living underwater, everything muffled and distant. The pills, they made everything confusing. But that's no excuse. I chose Warren. I let him come between us. I let him turn me against you. He manipulated you, Mom. He drugged you. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. I'm leaving him. Today. Karen's helping me. I've already packed a bag. It's in her car. Relief flooded through me. That's good, Mom. That's really good. I don't know what happens next, she admitted. With us. With the house. We'll figure it out, I promised. One step at a time. As we parted ways, my mother going with Aunt Karen, me heading back to Haley's apartment to share the news, I felt a weight lifting. The battle wasn't completely over, but the tide had turned decisively. What I didn't know was that Warren had one desperate move left. I received the frantic call from Connor that evening. Sam! Dad broke into the house. He's destroying everything. What? How do you know? The neighbors called me. They saw him smashing windows, heard crashing inside. I called the police, but you should get over there. I called Julia immediately, who advised me to wait for the police before approaching the house. But as I drove there anyway, I could see the flashing lights from blocks away. 3 police cruisers and a fire truck were parked outside my childhood home. When I arrived, Connor was already there, speaking with officers. Warren had broken in through the back door and begun systematically destroying anything of value, smashing mirrors, slashing furniture, breaking windows. When police arrived, he had barricaded himself in my father's old study, where he had apparently been burning documents in the fireplace. The fire had spread to the curtains and then to the bookcase. By the time firefighters contained it, the study and adjacent hallway had sustained significant damage. As I watched the firefighters working, an officer approached. Are you Samantha Mitchell? I nodded numbly. We have Mr. Brooks in custody. He's being charged with breaking and entering, destruction of property, violation of a restraining order, and potentially arson. Where is he now? The officer gestured to the last police cruiser, where I could see Warren in the back seat, his expression vacant, as he stared straight ahead. Connor joined us, his face grim. He was raving when they arrested him, talking about how no one would have the house if he couldn't. I think he meant to burn it down entirely. I shuddered at how close we'd come to losing not just the legal battle but the house itself, my father's legacy, the repository of our family memories. As the police car carrying Warren drove away, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness for the destruction one man's greed and control had wrought on our family. But mixed with that sadness was something unexpected. Hope. For the first time in nearly a year, I could see a path forward for me, for my mother, and for healing the wounds that had nearly destroyed us both. 6 months after Warren's dramatic arrest, I stood on the front porch of my childhood home, watching the spring rain nourish the newly planted garden. The past half year had been a period of rebuilding not just the house, but relationships, trust, and a sense of security that had been shattered. Warren was awaiting trial on multiple felony charges, including forgery, fraud, elder abuse, and arson. His bail had been denied after evidence emerged that he had indeed been planning to flee the country. The investigation into his business dealings had uncovered a web of financial crimes spanning years, affecting not just my mother but numerous clients and partners. My mother had filed for divorce immediately after Warren's arrest. She had spent the first month with Aunt Karen, undergoing treatment for withdrawal from the cocktail of medications Warren had been giving her. As her mind cleared, her horror at what she had allowed to happen and her own role in it deepened. I kept making excuses for him, she told me during one of our early, tentative conversations. Every time something didn't feel right, I would tell myself I was being paranoid or ungrateful. He was so good at making me doubt myself. Our reconciliation wasn't instant or easy. There were painful discussions, tears, and moments when the hurt felt too deep to overcome. But gradually, we found our way back to each other. 3 months after Warren's arrest, my mother moved back into the family home, now legally owned 60% by me, having gained an additional 30% from evidence of Warren's fraudulent activities, and 40% by her. The house itself had required extensive repairs. The fire damage to my father's study had been the most severe, but Warren's rampage had left few rooms untouched. We decided to use the opportunity to update and refresh the space while preserving its essential character. Your father would have approved, my mother said as we selected paint colors for the living room. He always said a home should grow and change with the family. Remarkably, many of the family heirlooms Warren had claimed were thrown away were recovered. He had stored them in a self-storage unit, perhaps planning to sell them later. My grandmother's jewelry, my father's woodworking tools, photo albums, and even the antique roll-top desk Warren had supposedly discarded were all returned to their rightful places in our home. My professional life had gradually stabilized as well. With the legal case resolved and Warren's smear campaign exposed, I had secured a new position at a boutique marketing firm that valued my experience and resilience. The flexible hours allowed me to support my mother's recovery while rebuilding my own life. Connor had become an unexpected ally and friend throughout the process. After testifying against his father, he had been effectively disowned by Warren's side of the family, but he seemed more relieved than distressed by the severing of those toxic ties. He controlled everything and everyone around him. Connor reflected during one of our coffee meetups. It's like finally being able to breathe after years of suffocation. Relations with the extended family had begun to heal as well. Once the full extent of Warren's manipulation and my mother's over-medication came to light, most relatives were horrified and apologetic. Cousin Melissa, now mother to a baby girl, had become a regular visitor, determined to rebuild our once close relationship. The legal ownership of the house had been formalized through a family trust that protected it from future attempts to force a sale. The trust included provisions for maintenance and eventual inheritance, ensuring my father's legacy would remain intact for generations to come. One rainy afternoon in April, my mother and I sat together in the rebuilt study, sorting through boxes of my father's papers that had been stored in the attic, safely away from the fire. I should have done this years ago, my mother admitted, but it was easier to keep everything boxed up: his things, his memory, the grief. Warren encouraged that, I pointed out gently. He wanted Dad erased. She nodded sadly, and I let him do it. That's the hardest part to forgive myself for. Dad would want us to move forward, I said, opening another box of papers. He always said holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. My mother laughed softly. He did say that. All the time. She paused, pulling out a small bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon. Oh, Sammy, look at these. They were love letters my father had written to her during a brief separation early in their relationship. Her eyes filled with tears as she read excerpts aloud, rediscovering the depth of his love and his hopes for their future together. As we continued sorting, I found a sealed envelope addressed to me in my father's handwriting. The date on it was just weeks before his death. With trembling fingers, I opened it, unfolding a letter I had never known existed. My dearest Samantha, it began. If you're reading this, something has happened to me, and you're now grown enough to understand what I want to tell you. The house we've built isn't just walls and a roof, it's a vessel for our family's love, for memories past and those yet to be made. Whatever happens in your life, remember that home isn't just a place, it's the people who fill it with laughter and tears, triumphs and failures, all the messy, beautiful parts of being human. I built this house with my hands, but you and your mother have filled it with heart. Protect that legacy, not out of obligation to me, but as a gift to yourself and those you'll love in the future. I am so proud of the woman you are becoming. All my love, always and forever, Dad. I couldn't speak through my tears. My mother moved to sit beside me, putting her arm around my shoulders as I handed her the letter to read. He knew, she whispered. Somehow, he knew you'd need to hear this someday. In that moment, sitting in the rebuilt study with rain pattering against the windows, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The battle for my father's house had been about more than property or money. It had been about preserving his legacy of love and family against those who would destroy it. As spring turned to summer, we established new traditions while honoring old ones. We planted a memorial garden for Grandma Evelyn, filled with her favorite roses and lilacs. Sunday pancake breakfasts resumed, sometimes with Connor or Aunt Karen joining us. The house once again became a home, not just a building but a sanctuary of healing and hope. Warren's trial began in late summer. The evidence against him was overwhelming. and he eventually accepted a plea deal that would keep him imprisoned for at least 7 years. Neither my mother nor I attended the sentencing. We had already given him too much of our lives. Sometimes in the evening, sitting on the porch my father had built with his own hands, I could almost feel his presence beside me, and Grandma Evelyn's too. Their love had created not just a house, but a legacy of strength and resilience that had sustained me through the darkest times. The journey had taught me that sometimes fighting for what's rightfully yours isn't just about possessions, it's about preserving the foundations of love and memory that make a house truly a home. And sometimes, the path to healing requires standing firm against those who would take what isn't theirs to take. I hope my story gives strength to anyone facing similar battles in their own families. Remember that you're not alone, and that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Have you ever had to fight for something that was rightfully yours? Or dealt with family betrayal? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories, and hit that share button if you know someone who might need to hear this message of resilience and hope. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, home isn't just where you live, it's where you belong. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.